Welcome
to the Modern Web Podcast.
Woo!
Welcome.
It's Morphin time.
Mighty Morphin, right?
Yeah.
I don't have gloves though, so I feel, I do like, I think the color's good, but...
Color looks good on you.
Yeah. Just trying to think of something to say about the man hands coming out of the Pink Ranger costume, but...
Like this booming voice. It does have a skirt too, so... Like, hey, you! Stop that.
Alright. So here we are at React Rally, Salt Lake City, Utah.
Is your helmet pretty warm inside?
Yeah, it's coming off.
We'll reveal our mystery guests here. There's Jay.
Reveal.
Jay Phelps. And Steven Rivas Jr.
Hello.
And Michael Jackson.
Hello.
So what should we talk about then?
Probably React, probably.
We are at a
generically.
rally.
Okay.
A little bit of Ember.
I did Ember.
You guys did Ember?
I did Ember
I
back
did
in
not
the
do
day.
Ember.
Yeah, I did Ember.
There,
I've done lots of Ember.
There was a time where there was like only Backbone, and then Knockout kind of explored that, and then it was Angular or Ember, and I was always like, not Angular, definitely Ember. I think long term that's going to be great, and I never actually learned it. So
You just went straight to React?
I just Backbone, 2010 forever, and then I went to React.
Man,
We did.
that's quite a leap.
It was
That's
interesting.
cool. That's actually really. I think you went to the best one. That was awesome.
Just like waited until something better.
Yeah,
Just
no,
never
that's-
upgrade until
That's very
actually need to.
That's very fortuitous timing, I think, on your part.
It worked out pretty nice,
Good.
but I feel like at the same time, I see a lot of the apps that Tracy here makes and all the stuff.
What does
that
Tracy use? Tracy, what do you do?
She does like everything.
So
Ember and Angular too.
Yeah.
Not React yet. In 2 weeks.
Really?
Yeah.
But we were gonna
And
maybe
here
try
you
to
are,
do
React Rally.
Yeah.
create React app. I need to show her that
Oh,
because it's like
sick.
a really easy way to just be like,
Sick.
hey, let's put some code in a browser. And
Yeah.
Totally.
thanks, Dan Abramov,
Just-
by the way, if
just-
you're watching this, because
just-
you watch all the podcasts that I'm in.
He told me.
Does
I
he like
think I think he
burritos
probably
too?
even follows you on Twitter.
It not quite. It's like I'm this close to James Kyle and
I'll put in a
Dan
good
maybe
word for you.
following me or something.
I could probably arrange James to follow you.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
I cornered
is
him
the
in-
outfit helping with
He'll
that.
see, yeah.
He'll be like, there you go.
All right.
So yeah, no Ember for me. Just kind of straight to React. But I feel like I missed out on a bunch of good stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, I would say that Ember taught me a lot. Like, I wouldn't say I bring Ember's patterns to React, because that's not probably the wisest thing to do, but the extreme, like the convention, it's very convention based, as you probably know, and Michael can attest to, and seeing what that can give you once you, like, if you build your own conventions within React, and seeing that you can save a bunch of time by having consistent patterns throughout your app. So like the biggest takeaway for me on that would just be that obviously if you're consistent with some sort of pattern, it's a lot more it's a lot easier to reason about, like, because we have multiple teams that work on the apps that I maintain, and they can write something and then I can jump into it and for the most part know what they're doing and the patterns that they're using.
Gotcha.
Michael?
I don't actually work on apps, real apps these days.
Lucky.
I feel kind of like I'm a cop-out. I just work on training material, and it's like, Steven's been to our training, it's like tabs and content toggle, right?
Yeah, it's pretty.
It's just those two
It's just those
all
two.
the time.
Well, you guys had the like sound one that Ryan.
yeah,
kinda did on fly there.
the what do we call it? The theremin? Yeah.
Is that what? It's just like
But,
hovered over it.
I mean,
Big
those are
Theremin,
just-
that's that, like, you're moving your hand
Yep.
and it detects
Yep.
something. Yeah.
I mean, but who knows if any of it's right, because I don't even build real apps anymore. I could be just like talking about like anything.
So we actually did their training course twice. One in SF, and then took our team back down to Carlsbad. And I feel like every time I sit there, I'm like, these guys get it. This is the best pattern. This is just so amazing. And I go back and I get these like hugely complex apps thrown at me, and I'm like, did I learn anything at the talk, or do I just like not know
See?
how to?
That is so.
The things that I do really well though are the toggles though.
I am
The tabs and
officially a
toggles.
talking head. That's what I am. I just talk. I've always worried about that though. I am.
I can relate because I've felt that way many times, like watching a tutorial or going and seeing a talk, or I've never done any like formal trainings before, but I imagine I would. That like I get out of it and I'm like I feel so good and feel like I know exactly how to do it, and then I go to start implementing it in an actual app, and I'm like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing. Like
Maybe
it's spaghetti.
maybe we should just do like a month-long training where we're gonna
That'd be great.
build
Do you think we could take a month off?
Twitter.com.
Well, I think
just do it.
yeah. One of the problems.
You know?
One of the problems I find is that is a lot of the examples because.
They're so contrived, right?
That's the word, but
Yeah.
and it's kind of it's a tough choice because if you don't make them contrived, like in the real world, building apps, there's going to be really complicated, non-trivial state management and side effect stuff.
Totally.
And it's going to be confusing to understand, regardless of how well you write it.
Totally.
And so there's a reluctancy when you're doing trainings, and particularly a reluctancy when you're doing talks, because
Yeah.
it's so short, to show those as examples. Because no one's going to understand what the heck is going on.
Well, even when you're like writing a book or something, like when's the last time you picked up like a technical book and you were like, oh wow, this is a deep dive, right?
Yeah.
Like it's always just kind of like about surface level deep.
Yeah.
And I mean, because what are you going to do? I remember one time actually I did get a book that did some deep dives, and the code listing is like 5 pages. So you can't like look through all you don't read that. Maybe on your computer monitor, obviously, but yeah, it's hard, to like really get like real world stuff. I mean, we try.
I can't reveal that my pants don't really fit here. The Ranger thing.
No, dude, it's
on the
your
training
shoes
side of
actually
things.
fit in really well. Black and black. It's good.
Well, these are mine.
It's like you were
and then
prepped
this
for
is
it. Oh, those are your pants.
Yeah. No, these pants I think fit. With the
Yeah, no,
Power
those
Ranger
are
thing.
what are they called? Capris. Those are like 3/4 length.
They look good. I think you need some
It's like
boots
all
like
the-
mine.
I do. The muscles and the boots and the gloves.
Yeah. I've got a complete set. He got shafted.
It's
So
like
I
you have,
challenged him to an arm wrestle on Twitter.
you have, like, Power
too, and
Ranger
I'm,
costume
immediately
envy.
regret it. Yeah, I kind of do.
You kind of about your
Shouldered.
pink, muscleless.
Well, it's only muscleless, and that because I'm an engineer. If I was
yeah.
a personal trainer doing a React podcast, I could probably fill this out a little better.
Totally,
but,
totally. Sorry, Jay, I cut you off. You were gonna say
You're
something.
fine. Since I actually haven't ever attended your trainings, do you guys go through like real world, like I know you don't go super deep, but do you go through application examples, or do you teach like APIs?
Yes. No, absolutely not. I abhor let's talk about the API. I think that sometimes you do have to talk about some API. Here's a method. Here's its signature. Here's what it does. But so we actually do have quite a few examples where it's like, we'll build a full-blown app. Of course, we will do all of the CSS for you, because that's the really hard part.
Yeah.
We have this chat app that we build, for example, in one of our trainings, and we give you all the HTML and the CSS, and then it's just like, okay, let's bring it to life. Let's put some D in that HTML, And so then you just like hook it up and start getting some event handlers and some things and some state. Okay, where we're gonna put that and how and it's I think it's it works. We're chatting with each other by the end of 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's like people who've never even touched React before getting going. So that's a real app. We have
You guys have
login. And
You guys have a lot of like that GitHub
The
API
search thing.
With, it fetches results from GitHub and then displays them. You scroll to the bottom and
It's like an infinite
refetches.
scrolling.
Oh,
video.
okay.
Scroll thing.
As an
Infinite
example,
scrollers
yeah.
I still use those every day on almost every page that I can. Just because if we have on some of our apps, it's like, hey, here's 10,000 rows.
I've got this
Can't-
perf example that I pulled out of one of the apps that I built, which is it's basically a grid of images, but you don't want to show them all if you've got 5,000 images. You don't want to load all those into the page. You want to just show the ones as it scrolls. You just want to load, so it really is stuff that we've worked on before, but simplified for a training environment, so you don't have.
Yeah.
Honestly, the biggest, what's crazy is every single time we do that thing, the biggest thing that people want to talk about is Webpack.
Really?
Oh yeah, I think it happened at Netflix. We did it
Oh,
at
really?
Netflix, didn't we? The first time we were at Netflix.
Actually, I didn't make it to the trainings at Netflix.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. That's
I
right.
kept
That's
having
right.
the
But yeah, the Webpack is like huge, right? It's like the other half of the puzzle. It's like, how do I write code? Okay, now how do I like deploy it?
Mhm.
You know, how do I make an app?
Have you played with Webpack 2 yet?
I've not. Have you?
Played, but not shipping anything yet.
It's supposed to be like, so what I understand is ES6 modules,
Mhm.
right? And so that means we
With the
can do
tree
some
shaking.
tree shaking.
Yeah.
But no, the other one I've been looking at is Rollup.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, the other day I was online and I was like, what is this Rollup thing? Like, I want to play with it. You know, I just want to use it on something. So I have this library that's not really related to any of my React stuff. It's called Expect, and you make assertions with it. And so it's pretty simple. So I was like, you know, I create a UMD module right now, just a UMD bundle, global bundle, with Webpack. And so I was like, maybe I'll use Rollup for that. But I didn't really have time to dig into it. Anyway, Rich Harris, the guy who wrote Rollup, he's like, I saw your tweet. And he submitted a PR. And it was amazing, like the change. So, you know, obviously Expect, it's not an app, it's more just like a little utility library. But the bundle was half the size. It booted in half the time. Like, it was really, I was
the guy
like,
that created Rollup.
yeah, the guy that
He
created
like
Rollup.
PR'd your library.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
you're doing that wrong.
Yeah, he was just like, here's how it would be if you used Rollup instead of Webpack.
Gotcha.
And I was just like, I was really impressed. Like, I think Rollup actually makes some pretty good trade-offs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't have like the broader scope of like, let me build your whole app.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely is. I mean, it does some. So the boot time was cut in half because he doesn't have. If you've ever looked at like the bundled output of like a Webpack, it's like a ton of functions, and he's just got like one function. I don't even fully understand exactly how that works, because he takes all the sources of all the different modules and puts them into one immediately invoked function body.
Yeah, and that's I don't know how that works either, but Webpack
Because
2,
you'd think
Webpack
that things
2
would collide,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Webpack
Yeah.
2 apparently does a similar thing, I'm
Yeah.
told, but I
Yeah.
haven't inspected the
Yeah,
output.
what I want to do is like get two modules and like name everything the same.
Well, I'm sure
and,
it does
like, roll-
hygiene, like it
roll 'em up and then be like-
renames the variables, you know, so
Yeah.
they don't clash, but
Yeah.
you know, then you have to worry about stock traces. I mean, not worry about them, but I mean, like.
Well, you
know,
gotta think
if-
about that kind of
if
stuff.
It's like, you know, if your function's now called something 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
you know, it's like that's.
So you could have source maps though, and that would give you
yeah, you're right. You're right.
source back to your stuff.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, cool stuff. We
I
get
actually,
to play
I always forget
stuff.
about source maps because I have them disabled because of performance for whatever reason.
Well,
DevTools has been fairly slow fairly recently because and I tracked it down to source maps, and I'm not blaming them. It's a really it's a large app.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, it's a non-trivial.
several megs of
Yeah,
JavaScript
source
that I
maps,
work
yeah.
on. So and there's a lot of source maps.
Yeah.
So I've had it disabled for months, and I just forgot the source
Yeah.
maps were a thing.
I think source maps are at least like. Aren't they at least like half the size or a quarter of the size of the
They're pretty,
original
yeah.
source?
They're
Like, they're
pretty
pretty
large.
substantial.
The app that I'm working on right now, we actually might have to take some of that stuff out because we have to build the bundles separately now. The slave that we use on Jenkins to do our browserify build runs into a range error on the call stack. It's just
Really?
like, you can't build your app. It's too
So
much. And then,
about-
I mean, the output isn't really that large. It's not like gigs of JavaScript or anything, but it just hangs when it's trying to do too many of the individual bundles at once.
Now, maybe this is a naive question, but could a person use something like Rollup for like production builds? Like use something like Webpack for your like normal development process for all the development awesomeness, but then use Rollup and feed the output of Rollup into Webpack for production. Obviously, that you wouldn't want to, if that was even probable, you wouldn't want to do that in normal development because it would slow things down. But
Yeah.
to get the I guess
Yeah,
it,
so
really it probably negates it with the Webpack too, as long as the tree shaking works just as good as Rollup.
I would imagine that Webpack 2 is probably pretty similar to what Rollup does, at least with JavaScript modules, you know.
Yeah.
And then of course Webpack can do, you know,
The
bundle
loader
your,
stuff.
the loader stuff, which
Yeah.
is awesome.
Yeah,
But-
I did see recently. I went to one of the modern web meetups and learned about that Webpack 2 has this way better code splitting now. It uses system.js for the code splitting. So you do like, you know how you do require assure or
dot ensure.
Yeah. Instead of doing that, you just do system import, and it knows from that. And so that like basically your code is like you could run it without run it without the compiler.
In theory, yeah.
In theory, you know, but.
I wonder how they do their. Oh, they probably do the system module loader spec, which is that's like a whole nother thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Sometimes you just gotta like ship something, you know?
Oh yeah.
Like,
that's kind of where.
Sure. That's why we haven't even touched any of that because I'm like, it's like I'll wait for it.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
I'll take some, you know, I'll be a trailblazer on a certain amount of things.
Yeah.
But like, I don't want to make my entire app trailblazing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So I'm just waiting for that stuff to settle down.
Exactly.
Waiting for Webpack 2 to ship. All the, you know.
Let me know when it ships.
So, I saw a tweet, I think it was yesterday, maybe the day before, about, and this is to Michael, about the HistoryJS stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, can you talk, like, is that, like, not, I couldn't tell from the tweet whether that's something that's kind of secretive, or you're...
No, so I'm not somebody who, so I write a lot of open source code, and in my experience, it's always better to just, like, get it out there as soon as you can. Like, talk about it, get people involved, you know, get eyes on it, get people using it as soon as you can. And you know, so some people are kind of the opposite. They like to make it like more of like a Steve Jobs style announcement, you know, like hide it from the world, and then all of a sudden, voila, like, and the curtain comes off, and it's like perfect, you know. And I find that whenever I try and do that, I always like wait too long, and then. And so I just like to get out there. So what I shipped the other day was just a very, very early version of this library called React History. So I wrote this history library a year and a half ago, something like that. It was basically, we were working on React Router. There was this piece of it that I thought, hey, you know, everybody's going to have to do this history management stuff. Even the Angular and the Ember and the, you know, the Cycle people, like everybody. People using Redux, they're all going to have to like interface with the browser history stack. Mm-hmm. It's like, why don't I just extract this piece here, and I'll call it history, and then this will be like, it's kind of this core library that we can all sort of use. And so we used that in React Router 2 and 3. The 3 actually, it's still in a beta, but anyway. My hope was that it would kind of become this kind of common layer that a lot of different people would adopt. You'd get a lot of different eyes on it, and it's done pretty well as an open source library. But at the same time, I go back and I look at it now, and I think, like, I'm doing things like I'm managing a lot of different state in there in this history library, and since it's just me and JavaScript, like, I've got to figure out how to do that, right? Mm-hmm. I don't have things like the React component lifecycle or some other kind of like, you know, here's setup, here's teardown, here's you're going to get new props or whatever. You know, I don't have any of that. And maybe I've just been so spoiled by like the React lifecycle, but if I don't get to write code in that paradigm, I'm just like, I always end up reinventing like half of that paradigm, right?
Sure.
I always end up reinventing, you know, object initialization, teardown, you know, and so I was at this point where I was just like, you know what? What if I wrote the whole thing as React components? Like, what if it was just React component? Because everybody knows how to build a React component, right? And they know how to use them, and they know how to render them and stuff. And this is kind of actually some of the mistakes that we made with the early routers. We had these components that weren't actually real, like the route components, that you couldn't render them. Yeah. They were just like for configuration.
DSL,
yeah, and it kind of threw people a little bit. And so with this next release of React History and then React Router, the idea is everything's a component. It's all just React components. So you know how to render React components, you know how to deal with them. You don't have to, you do any sort of static thing up front that you might have to adjust later and like figure out your own kind of life cycle. It's all just components. And so it's actually been a lot of fun. I've actually like using this React history library. I've actually like, I don't know, you know when you have a little bit of like help from under you from the React framework, then that kind of frees up your mind to think of like higher level concerns. You know, things of like, what should the responsibility of this class actually be? You know, it something small, something really, really small that came out of this refactoring, for example. Right now, the history library is responsible for query string serialization, which means that it is the only piece of the current React router that knows how to create hrefs, right? Which means, I mean, it's kind of a trail here, that links that are rendered on the server need an instance of history in order to create an href. And so for the past year, I've been telling people, look, don't use history on the server. Oh, but I need history to create an href. I know, it's a bad abstraction, right? Because history doesn't really belong in a stateless environment that is an HTTP server. Like, you just make a request, you generate the HTML, you're done, right? There's no time going on there. So there shouldn't actually be a whole lot of state outside of like, here's the session state, right? Here's the current user or whatever. And so it was a good abstraction, mostly, but then it had like these little pieces on it that I was like always really annoyed by and always really frustrated with. And so what we did was when we started looking into React Router 4, we were like, okay, what does this look like? And our initial prototype, we just were like using the history library, and we're just like, okay, we'll get a history and we'll pass it into your router, and then I was like, you know what, that sucks, because on the server you're still gonna need this history object, which doesn't belong on the server. Like, what if we rethought that piece? What would that actually look like? And so the work that emerged from that was the React history library, which, as I said, is just components. And turns out you don't actually use those things at all on the server. You don't render them at all. You only render those in a stateful client-side environment. And then on the server, you use like a lower level API, which is a static router. And so we finally actually have a really good integration point with libraries like Express and other like Node HTTP servers, right? They have these hooks like on push, on replace. What happens when you push? Well, if I'm on the server, I'm probably just going to res.redirect somewhere else. If I'm on the client, well then I'll push a new href into the address bar, stuff like that. So I feel like in a lot of ways, the React history and the React router work that we're doing right now is just hitting on the right abstraction. And when you do, a lot of code melts away, a lot of things become a lot clearer. You kind of look at the code and go, huh, like that's obvious, right? Like it probably should have just always been like that.
Now, how does that integrate with something like Redux? Like, there's the existing implementations for syncing the state with that, or being able to manipulate. Like the app that one of the apps I work on does not a lot, but some URL or transitions, I guess you should say, router transitions inside Redux middleware. So, like, is there still an imperative API that I could wrap around that so that I can dispatch actions?
For sure, yeah. So the idea was that these history components from the React History API, you know how like text inputs work? They can like be controlled, and you can give them a value, and then give them an on change, and then when on the on change you can decide, okay, what's the new value, and then if it's changed, I'll like give you a new value, right? So it's kind of this controlled API. We're using that exact same idea in these history objects.
Oh, so they can be controlled or uncontrolled.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can actually maintain the state of the history
somewhere else if you wanted. Yeah.
Nice. So you don't have to do syncing. You
exactly.
can just literally have it. And it's
so you've got an on change,
awesome.
and then you've got a location prop that you can just use to like control this thing, so you could keep the state in your Redux store if you want to. Again, though, it's about hitting on the right abstraction, right? Like once you hit on it, then it's like, oh, okay. Why don't we just make these things like text inputs?
Yeah. Example of the declarative components, like the lifecycle hook stuff, or the like transitioning stuff.
Yeah, people didn't like those very much.
And
some people freaked out.
Yeah, right. It's very novel, and so it's very I knew it would be controversial because I thought of the same thing.
Yeah.
And every single person I've ever shown that type of thing, and I've talked to like the React core team about similar things, about like, hey, is there any way we could, in like a functional component, we could have lifecycle hooks of some sort, maybe declaratively, or like declarative AJAX calls and things like that. And unanimously, almost everyone is always just so weirded out by it. Like, it's just it's just like, oh, I don't know. I just feel like I need an imperative API for that.
So we actually give you both. We give you this history object, kind of like the history objects that you're used to now. They've got go, push, replace, that kind of thing. You've got your imperative API. And then on top of that, we thought, I was writing that declarative API actually came out of, I was writing some unit tests, and I was like, how could I make these unit tests like really easy to follow and read? And all they do is they're just these tiny little wrappers. They use component did mount and component did update, which is where you're supposed to do imperative stuff anyway, like go and do imperative stuff on the DOM. And then they pull the history off of context and then call a method on it. So they're not really. The implementation is very, very small of all of those components. And so it really is just an experiment. In our trainings, we talk a lot about how you should be able to just read your render methods and know exactly what's going on. Like, the words inside your render method should indicate to you, something like, for example, like React Motion. If I throw a motion component into my render, now I know, hey, there's some animating going on here. Instead of throw a class name on it, or like just a click handler that's going to like do something imperatively in one of the other lifecycle. Like, it's great to see that motion component in there, right? And similarly, it's great, at least it feels to me pretty good to see these action components in there. To see like a push or a replace, or in the router you've got redirect components in the next version of the router. So you can just stick a redirect, if they did something, okay, render a redirect, and then that'll go redirect you off somewhere else. So we have the imperative API, and I think our position right now is we'll always give you the imperative API. If you want to tuck that away in one of the other lifecycle methods in a click handler or something, you can go ahead and you can call that imperative API. Or we're going to give you these components that are just going to do those things, call those methods for you on mount, basically. And again, it just comes back to reading the render methods, and I think the render methods read quite nicely with that kind of stuff. But yeah, it really threw a lot of people. There were some people who were very passionately kind of like, that's wrong. And so it's just like, well, we'll see how it goes.
It kind of sounds like it would be just from like the warnings that you see, like, don't do this in a render method. Don't go ahead and like dispatch something in a render method that
it feels impure,
potentially dangerous or
pure.
impure. So I'd be curious to, like, because I do like reading cleaner and cleaner renders.
That's I think the important distinction is that it is pure, because if you're providing the props that will tell it to mount that component, and so if you provide those same props, like if you're unit testing, and if you render that component, provide those same props, you're going to get the same exact result every single time. Totally,
exactly. So I get it. I get the kind of mind bending that's going on right now, and that it's mind bending to me too a little bit, which is why I think it's not the only API that we prescribe. But on the other side, it just it reads so nice. It reads really nicely. So anyway, we'll see how that all works out. I mean, if it turns out to be a bad idea, we can scrap it.
Yeah, right.
But I think the React Router for link is actually going to use something like push in its render method, so that people can see, oh yeah, like that's how it's used. I think it'll be good.
Are you guys using Redux or anything right now in your team?
We kind of just got started on Redux. Most of our apps on our teams are Redux, but I would say they're simple Redux implementations. We're kind of still exploring out what do we keep in the Redux store and what do we keep in component state, and then when is it painful to have made one call versus the other. So
how are you guys handling async side effects?
Most of the time, our actions are kind of just like the pattern that she described earlier in the talks today, the thunk one, where it's like I'll dispatch this action when I start the AJAX, and then I'll dispatch this one when it gets back, or this one when it fails. So they're pretty simple in that regard, but
cool.
pattern-wise, for our apps, it seems to work pretty well because there a lot of the logic lives on the back ends. So we're just going to do that and then render the results.
I thought it was pretty cool what Kate Hudson was talking about with the. By the way, I thought I was like, wow, Kate Hudson's here, like Michael Jackson. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah, right.
What other celebrities are gonna pop up? She was talking about how in Firefox they had kind of the redux state was living in a completely separate process. Did you guys catch that?
Yeah.
Part of her talk.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was like,
I loved her
that's
talk, by the
something
way.
I'd never
Yeah.
heard.
No,
Thought
that was
before,
a
right?
great
Like
talk.
having, keeping that state out of your components lets you do things like IPC a lot more easily, right? Which is interesting. That's an interesting thought.
Have you guys played around a lot with Redux? Or
Yeah,
are you guys teaching it?
We've done a ton with Redux. We've taught it. So we actually teach how to use Redux in our fundamentals workshop, and then we actually teach how to make Redux
It's actually a pretty cool session.
in
because
the
it's
advanced workshop
Because
because it uses
Redux is pretty
Redux
simple.
with what?
just from scratch.
From scratch.
No, just with vanilla JavaScript.
Yeah. So Redux it takes the store and it puts it on context, and then whenever the store updates, you've got the connect method, which makes a higher order component. So we actually we talk about higher order components, we talk about context, and then it's like those are the two things that you need to know about in order to actually make Redux for yourself. And so then it just kind of peels away the curtains a little bit and not so mysterious. But yeah, I've used Redux a ton. I think that Redux has actually shown us some really, really great things. The time travel stuff, this idea of, just today, like the, inter-process communication, sort of modeling your state outside of your components. I do hope that we can, in the future, find a way to do the same sorts of tricks, like the same sorts of really cool things that Redux can do now, in a way that is a little bit more integrated with React, in a way that's like a little bit more kind of like, okay, this is core React. Because right now we've essentially got these two different ways, right?
Yeah.
And it's like whenever we're talking about like, where do I put this state?
Yeah.
Do I shoot an action off? Do I call a method and put it in some component state? Like, I think it would be great if we kind of had, I don't know, just a little bit more, like there's an issue right now on the GitHub repo that's been there forever, on the Facebook GitHub repo, that's like, how do we externalize the state tree? Because we've got this great mechanism for managing state, but it's like kind of encapsulated inside these components. So could we like externalize that so people could build a middleware API or a logger or something like that on top of it, Yeah, so Redux.
Yeah.
We use it.
Have you seen any of the efforts to do component local reducers? So it's like Redux, it's like having Redux for each component. Not all the time, but for
I haven't actually seen any work like that. No.
Yeah, there's a bunch of projects for if you're doing a form or something, you would have instead of having all of that state go to your normal stores reducer, you'd have just a component local reducer. You dispatch actions that it only sees and it doesn't bleed out until you want, if you want to dispatch actions for the whole world, you can.
Yeah.
So it's kind of blending those two.
Is that
I don't use
who's
it.
doing that?
I've seen 3 or 4 different competing examples.
That's usually where we run into issues. If we have it in the Redux store, anything firing off any action, we have to on these complex grid renders or something like that, we have to start considering about now this whole UI is re-rendering because somebody's toggling a search over here and trying to. That's usually when we go, all right, let's keep that search visible in that state.
Yeah, you gotta be a little
Versus,
more careful on what you're connecting and how
Yeah.
you're opting in to non-pure re-renders. Yeah.
It would be interesting to see because we have some cases where the main app can live and have its own store, but then sidebar flyout or something. I'd be curious to see about having a Redux store just for that application or that mini application.
Yeah. You haven't seen any solutions that I was in love with. It's an interesting space that a lot of people are experimenting with. Which there's MobX as well, which is the opposite of Redux, but same goal. Which is to me when I first saw it, literally I was like, this is Ember's.
Totally.
This is
Totally
this is Ember for React.
It totally is.
So it was
set this property, the UI updates.
Yeah.
Yep.
And having computed properties, and it's like
Do they have Do they use like object observe in MobX? No.
No, they use the same, basically, effectively the same mechanism that Ember does.
They have get and set methods.
No, but they do it. They use features that Ember just has not committed to because of lack of support.
Oh, okay.
Getters and setters.
Stuff like
older
that. Okay.
support. They use you don't have to use decorator
That makes
and all
sense.
that stuff. But they basically are using things that the on the Ember could totally do, but just has not yet transitioned to do.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Like Ember they haven't transitioned to using classes yet, like class-based syntax, which you can say one way or the other, but they're just taking the more safe route.
Yeah. They want stuff that works, and that's not.
Yeah, and particularly there's been in MobX, you don't have to, when you create a computer property, you don't have to define the dependencies of that computer property. You don't have to say, if I have a full name
if this thing
property, you don't have to
changes,
say
then
a first name and last name or dependencies. It can pick it up automatically. And there's been several, it's not, Ember could
That's
totally do
interesting.
it. But there's some footguns that come to that when you start dealing with arrays and certain things that there's third-party projects that do this, and I've experimented with myself back when I did Ember.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it ended up being things would update that I didn't, because you're not explicitly saying for it to recompute.
Because you updated something over here.
Yeah, you just
and then
unknowingly
there's a
are
dependency of-
recomputing something, and it becomes a lot harder. It's kind of similar to the two-way binding thing. It's harder to reason because of magic.
Yeah.
And so it's tough,
Yeah.
for the 95% case, it's all, that's
Great.
awesome. You don't have to do any boilerplate,
Yeah.
and it's just magic.
And every
So
once in a while
I'm
you
on the
get-
fence about it. I've experimented with MobX, but I haven't written any apps full time
Yeah.
using it yet. But
Yeah, I think I really need to get back in and just write a really large app. Not a really large app, but an app,
you could write a GUI for npm CDN or something, like a dashboard for that.
Yeah. So I actually recently took to writing these tiny apps. I wrote this little calculator thing just on a whim a couple weeks ago. I was like maybe I'll write a calculator in React, and that's.
You were re-implementing the iOS calculator.
Yeah. And I was like, that's non-trivial, right? That's I'm doing math. There are a couple of different functions on the calculator. Maybe that'll be interesting. And so I kind of did that whole thing just with React State, but I don't know, maybe. I know the MobX guy, for example. I know he was working on I think it was a spreadsheet application, which when I look at that kind of API, I'm like, yes.
Yeah, it's very
totally
it's
makes
reactive,
sense.
and a spreadsheet.
I changed
is
this
reactive.
cell over here. I want all the other values to update, right? Because this one is the sum of all those cells and something like that. So yeah, I think it totally makes sense for what he was working on, and I told him that. I haven't ever really felt the need to go too far out of set state, which is why I say maybe I just need to build bigger things.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I build big things, then maybe
Yeah.
maybe it'd be like, oh yeah,
Multi-page wizards.
that's why people really love Redux, something like that. Anyway. All right, how long have we been going?
I think you guys are good, but we have to end with a dance party.
Dance party? I feel like I've been dancing a little bit this whole time, oh, Michael and Michael and Jay.
Let's talk a little bit more. Get
I just had this Mountain Dew, so I've got
No, I'm dancing now.
Oh, good. How about you dance when we throw money at you?
I don't know if the pink Power Ranger suit is the kind of outfit that they wear.
Why didn't I just do this? This is way better than putting it all on.
Oh, can you just do the? Okay.
Let's dance party, guys.
Are we supposed to stand and dance? I'm really terrible at dancing.
It's Morphin time!
Mighty Morphin!
Go Power Rangers! My face just fell off.
I tried. Thank you guys for being on the Modern Web Podcast.
You're welcome.
Hey, no worries.
Where can we find
Should
you
we
guys
say
on
goodbye?
the internet?
Oh,
Yeah.
we're saying
Internet.
goodbye now. You can find me on Twitter at _Jay Phelps, JayPhelps.
I'm also on Twitter. I'm not at SPR because that's taken. I'm not at SPRJR because that's also taken. Both totally inactive accounts.
Right.
No,
Mine too. That's why I'm
Twitter
underscore.
username.
SPRJRX. It's terrible.
SPRJRX.
Yeah. Well, you had to add a letter at the end. So what letter would you add to J Phelps? X,
Underscore.
probably.
He added
Underscore.
an
X is
Underscore.
cool.
Yeah,
It could have been
X,
SPR.
That's why I'm
Oh,
underscore.
the X is cool, dude. It's like X. I like it. I'm M Jackson.
Verified?
No. No, you know what? Now that they've opened
Verified
up,
Michael Jackson.
now that they've opened up,
Wouldn't that be confusing?
Oh,
I
gosh.
feel like you're never gonna get verified simply because of
Because-
that.
yeah.
Now that they opened up verification, I feel like
What
it's
is
not
it?
as cool.
Just
Yeah,
showing your
yeah,
ID,
yeah.
kind
I
of.
mean, I saw freaking like, Sebastian McKinsey was verified. I mean, I was like, okay, great, Sebastian.
Kind
Love
of sound
you,
like
right?
one of those
But,
like,
I
vanilla
don't think there
WoW
is any,
players.
like-
I am the
Like,
real creator
no.
of Babel,
Right,
just in
right.
case you were wondering.
Yeah. I don't think like all the people I see getting verified now.
Yeah, who
like-
does
I'm like-
verify?
I'm like, why would anyone mistake someone out? Like, there isn't like people making fake accounts for Yehuda.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly, right? It's like, okay.
how many Yehuda cats are
Hey, look,
there?
if you guys want to be verified and they need some sources, I will verify you
Yeah,
guys.
you will.
Good.
Okay. Even
But-
though you're kind of, you don't
No,
want.
I don't
you just
think-
want everybody to have the blue
I don't
check
think
mark.
I'll
It's
ever do
only
it.
for.
Well, so
How we did it back in
once,
the-
when everybody has the blue check mark and I'm the only one who doesn't,
Then you'll be
Then
cool.
you'll be cool again.
then I'll be cool.
Again.
Yeah.
You're
Right now,
still
no.
cool.
No, no.
No, you're not because you don't have the blue star.
Exactly.
But
So do you? I imagine you have a lot of Michael Bolton.
Office space.
Yeah, those type of interactions.
Every once in a while.
Where someone's like,
every once in a while.
Michael Bolton?
Yeah. Like, he's the
Is
jerk,
that your
not
real
me.
name?
Yeah.
Are you related to that singer guy?
Well, so, no relation, actually. No relation.
I know.
Surprisingly, I know.
I know.
Surprisingly. So, little story about my name, if we have time.
Absolutely.
I used to be kind of embarrassed about my name. Believe it
Oh,
or
really?
not. Believe it or not.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
When I was
See
in
it.
when I was in 6th grade, the news broke that Michael Jackson was having little kids over to his place and molesting them, and so I in 6th grade learned what the term molestation meant. So for a kid, that's kind of like that's not what you want to be learning at that age.
That's your namesake.
Yeah, exactly. So and there, I remember actually there was like the janitor at my school. He knew my name, and this is my elementary school, and I'd be like walking around like on my way to lunch, and I'd be like, "Hey, Michael Jackson!" and I'd be like, "Oh man!" It's like I couldn't acknowledge him or anything. So it built up kind of this complex, and it got to the point where when I was a teenager, I would like have a really hard time like dealing with it, and people would. And anyway, my father noticed me one day. I introduced myself to somebody and I said, "My name is Michael Jackson." And I kind of like paused between my first and last name. And after the interaction, my dad, he pulls me aside and he goes, "Are you ashamed of your name?" And I was like, I guess, yeah, because it's like, "Don't you ever be ashamed of your name." He goes, "That's your name. That's not anybody else's." I'm like, "Well, actually, it kind of is." but it kind of helped me. So I was like, okay, no, he's right. Like, this is my name. I got to deal with this, right? Like, I got to own it, or else. So anyway, now whenever I introduce myself to somebody, I say, "Hi, I'm Michael Jackson." He says,
Are the Power Rangers interviewing you?
It is. It's like that.
Yes. Yes, Power Rangers are interviewing you, Michael.
No, I'm here for comic relief. They're the real show.
We're not comic relief.
No, you guys are the pros.
Hey,
I'm just here for-
Steven, you know that we dated in canon, right?
Nice. We dated?
Yeah.
All right.
The Green Ranger and the Pink Ranger.
He said, "Don't remind him."
It's the worst 6 months of my life. I'll never get them back.
We can put that one on the back.
This one first?
Yep. No, I'll put this one on the front.
This thing
I
gets
really
hot.
hope that some of your beard comes out from underneath the. 'Cause
That's the best part.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
You got it? I'll just hold this. I'll
Here.
Let the pros.
His face fell off.
I got it. Actually, I don't know. I don't want to smash your head in there.
There's still, you're mostly just hidden beard.
Okay. All right. Boom.
You are the Pink Ranger.
Boom. All right. It's done.
Wait, Michael, I think you have to sit in the middle, just like
I
for
actually
the.
don't know though. Power Ranger.
When you. All right.
Still beard? There's not really any beard.
No beard.
All right.
I could be the
Little
interviewer
bit.
if you want. I can just ask him questions about.
Wait, but sit in the middle
Should
so
we
there's
hold
like
hands? Do we have
so
to hold
you're
hands?
squished.
Oh, because
Yeah.
we were dating.
Oh wait, are you guys gonna hold
Boots
hands?
and gloves and stuff.
Yes, they have to sit
Okay.
next to each other because they
Do I
were.
not have boots and gloves?
Does he have boots and gloves? Tracy.
No, I don't know. I don't.
Okay.
I'm not.
He doesn't have muscles, that's for sure.
I'm a complete outfit.
Everything. He beats me at
Should have gone red. Red's probably got muscles.
Ray doesn't have a helmet.
Yeah, then it'd be red, but
Okay, who's kicking off the podcast?
is it going?
Yeah. Well, say welcome to the Modern Web Podcast.